Rabotai, over the years, we use the 3 weeks as a time to talk about topics that during the year that weren't so easy to talk about. This is a time that Klal Yisrael is much more serious about the Avodat HaKodesh. It's a time that we're able to kind of focus on the do's and don'ts, leading us up to Tisha B'Av, reminding us why we're still here. The rabbis tell us something fascinating. You know, when you talk about 3 weeks, you talk about 21 days. There's another 21 days in the course of the year that are pointed out and highlighted as 21 special days for Jewish people. And those are the days that start from, believe it or not, the first day of Rosh Hashanah and goes right through the 10 days to Yom Kippur, and it makes its way up until Hoshana Rabbah. So there are 21 days, let's get this straight. There are 21 days from Rosh Hashanah to Hoshana Rabbah. And then there are 21 days from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz to Tisha B'Av. And you know that the great rabbis, the Ben Ish Chai, many of the great rabbis say that these 21 days are no different one to the other. They're both days of greatness. Wow, that'd be 21 days in the summer and 93 degrees. With people's minds flying through the different difficulties of the challenges of what the summer and its hot weather brings to the life of a Jew and the service of a Jew. And those 21 days could actually be compared to the 21 holiest days of the year. The 21 days that start from Rosh Hashanah till Yom Kippur, says the Ben Ish Chai, says the rabbis, yes. What you can accomplish in those 21 days, you can accomplish in these 21 days. But it's a different type of service. The 21 days from Rosh Hashanah until Hoshana Rabbah are 21 days of judgment and closeness. The 21 days from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz till Echa, Tisha B'Av, 21 days of mourning and closeness. What's the word that's the common denominator between those 21 and these 21? Closeness. Closeness. It's amazing. In life, you'll find out that your best friends shine forward in two specific times. When you're making a simcha, and God forbid, lo aleinu v'lo aleichem, I don't even want to say it, but God forbid when a person loses a family member and they're sitting and they go into mourning. But those are the two times you find out who your real friends are. Rosh Hashanah until Hoshana Rabbah is like the wedding between God and the Jewish people. And by smachot there's a closeness. And by smachot you find out who your real friends are, because you could tell by a wedding who shows up because they have to and who shows up because they want to. You tell the people that just kind of put it on when they come into the wedding, oh, mabruk, inshallah. And then 2 minutes later they're nowhere to be found, but they're by the bar and this is supper for them. And then when it comes to the dancing, there's nowhere to be found. They're sitting, going for another round of corned beef. But where are the friends? The friends aren't by the walk-by corned beef station. The friends are waiting on the dance floor, pumping up the music, can't wait for the countdown, for the Hatan and Kala to come out. Those guys that are standing and waiting and yearning for the Hatan and Kala to walk out at that first split second of their marriage, and you want to jump on your best friend, and you want to hug him and pick him up on the chair in the air, and you want to dance with him, and you want to show him your happiness. Those are your real friends. By weddings, you find out who your real friends are. There's the inner circle of friends, and then there's the outer circle of friends, and then there are the spectators, the bystanders, who basically are there because they have to be there. We're related. Inshallah, everything should work out for you, honey. Thank you. By weddings, you find out who's close and who's not. There's another time that you'll find out who's close and who's not. And that is, God forbid, if we should never know. We should never know from these things. But God forbid if you know of a family that loses a family member. They lose a father, they lose a mother, they lose... we just came out of COVID. We know what this means. There was a time, you guys remember, between Purim and Pesach, not so long ago, that the sirens were going up and down the streets, and it was like people were dropping like flies, one after the next. We were getting the text messages, we couldn't even go to the funerals. We couldn't go to the funerals. Just recently somebody reminded me, because I bumped into them by Rabbi Lankry, Zecher Tzadik Libracha, by Rabbi Lankry's funeral. One guy walked up to me and he said to me, "Rabbi, you remember? Me and you, we were the only guys in the cemetery when Rabbi Dahan passed away. And we didn't have a minyan. And we had to walk around to the different people. There were so many people there that their family members passed away. You know how we made minyan by the cemetery? In order to say Kaddish. You know how we made minyan? We had to pick up all the other avelim of all the other dead people, of all the other deceased, and make a minyan of avelim. Because those were the only people that came to the cemetery. Nobody else would come. The grave diggers were in hazmat suits. They wouldn't even let me take their shovel. And they were in the suit. All I had was the mask, have a nice day, That's all I had. And they wouldn't give me their shovel. They were worried for themselves. The guy was in a bodysuit from head to toe. And I was in my yeshiva jacket. and he was worried. And because they didn't give us the shovel, me and this guy went down on our hands and knees. And with our hands, we started pushing down the dirt. And we buried Rabbi Dahan with our hands. With our hands. I'm telling you straight up. But those are the moments that you find out who's close to you. When a person sits in mourning, we should never know. But the people that show up and cry with you are the people that are close to you. There are the people that rejoice with you, your closest friends. And there are the people that cry with you, your closest friends. The common denominator between both is that they're both your closest friends. Some you find out through rejoicing, the 21 days between Rosh Hashanah and Hoshana Rabbah, the great wedding between God and the Jewish people year after year. And sometimes you find out who's close to you through mourning and Avelut. And that's these 21 days now, between Shiva Asar Tammuz and Echa. So you can come to God as close. But those 21 days is through rejoice, and these 21 days is through mourning. To feel that we lost something, to feel about Israel, to feel about Yerushalayim, to yearn for it, to want it. Guys, listen to me. Certain things in this world were placed in a position that the more you want it, the more you yearn for it, the more you'll get it. And if you don't want it and you don't yearn for it, there's no money in the world that can buy it for you. And one of those things is Eretz Yisrael. One of those things is Torah, by the way. If you want to become something special in Torah one day, you want to become something special. I'm not dafka even a rabbi, I don't mean that. But you want to be a real Ben Torah, knowledgeable Torah person. Someone who knows a lot of Torah. Someone who one day will finish Shas. Someone who one day will know so much halacha that he'll be the go-to guy. That his family on every step of the way can turn. Dad, are we allowed to do this on Shabbat? Are we allowed to do that on Shabbat? And Dad doesn't have to look like an Am Aretz. Dad could actually come back and say, yes, no, that's mutar, this is asur. You know what that means to kids? Do you know what that means to your children? when they know that their dad is a Bal Davar. He is someone who's holding and learning, and he's educated to be Talmid Chacham. You know what that means to a kid? Where they can turn to their dad in any area of halacha and say, are we allowed to do this? Are we not allowed to do this? And dad comes out with an answer on the spot. Or maybe your kid has a test. The next day in high school, he's preparing a piece of Gemara. He has a Gemara test. He says, Dad, hey, I don't know the Gemara. Can you go it over with me? And the dad looks at the kid and says, I don't, I haven't looked at a Gemara since I was in high school. The kid looks at his father like, oh, you don't know Gemara either? Okay, so then why do I have to know it? But if the dad rocks it, he sits down and opens the Gemara and says, wow, my gosh, Baba Mitzvah, I haven't seen this in years. I love this Gemara. Come on, what page? Where are we up to? And it doesn't matter. He can open up an art scroll. He can open up whatever it doesn't matter. But he knows the skills of how to learn. And he sits down with his son and he rocks the page. And he goes through the Gemara with his son and he works it with him and he gives it over to him. And his son is, wow, my dad, wow, he's sharp. Dad is sharp. Do you know what you just did to your son? Do you know how you raised the bar for him? Do you know how you raised his want and love to one day be something in learning? Because you gave him something of an inspiration that sits by his dad. Sons look up to fathers. And I want to say something really clear. This is amazing because I didn't even prepare to speak about this. But this is what Borei Olam wants me to say. I'm going to say it. You need to know something. A son needs his father like someone in a desert who needs water. Every boy needs a dad, or a father figure, or a Rebbe. Somebody that cares and loves him enough to be able to put an arm around him and really give him strength, confidence, self-worth, and guide him. Because without that, the tools, the development of the guy, no matter how talented he is, without that dad or father figure, will not be the same. And it'll be painful. And later on, they're going to have difficulty. Difficulty even making a decision. Decision making comes from your dad. Your confidence comes from your mom. Decision making comes from your father. This is an amazing idea. This is the time that we come close to Hashem. How? We cry with Him. And when someone cries with you, they connect to you. That's when you find out who your real friends are and who means something to you. Yeah? I have a lot on this topic, but then it would take me away from the topic I actually did want to speak about tonight. So let's take a minute and talk. The more you yearn for Eretz Yisrael, the more you'll get it. The more you yearn for Torah, oh, that's how we got off on this one. The more you yearn for Torah, the more you become great in Torah. It's these things that Hashem wants to know. How much do you want it? So guys, I want to ask you a question. Is there anyone in history that would come to mind as the greatest lover and want to yearn for Eretz Yisrael more than Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu stands on the top of the mountain and he cries tears and he begs Hashem 515 times, I beg of you, please, pretty please, with a cherry on top, with sprinkles, I'm begging you, let me into Eretz Yisrael, I beg you, please Hashem, let me in, 515 times. And Hashem doesn't say no. He says, not yet, not yet, not yet. Till he's gonna say the last prayer, 516, which we once gave a whole class on. that prayer actually was Amen Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevarach. Wow, that was a class. Oh, wow. Hashem says, stop! Ravlach, stop. Don't say that last prayer. You say that last prayer, 5:16, I'm going to have to let you into Israel, and now's not the time yet for you to go in. Not yet. But look how much he wanted. 515 times he cried his eyeballs out. And Klal Yisrael watched as he begged and he cried and he pleaded, please let me in, let me go into Israel just for one day, for one moment. And Hashem says no. And we already explained in a different class that while Moshe was crying and begging to go to Israel, the Jewish people were watching him. And as they watched him beg and plead and cry for Israel, he retaught them what it means to yearn for the love of Eretz Yisrael. And he undid the damage of what the Meraglim did. That was the last class that Moshe Rabbeinu gave to the Jewish people. A class of 515 prayers, of crying and begging and showing how special Israel is to a Jew, and how the only way to get it is by begging for it and showing how much you want it. Because if you don't want it, you're not going to get it. Now with this intro, I need to ask you a bomb question. Forgive me, guys. In this week's Parashan Matot, there are two tribes that come up to Moshe Rabbeinu and they say, Moshe, we have a lot of cattle. We have a lot of flock. Right over here in the Transjordan, what we call in Hebrew, Me'ever la Yarden, right? That's what the Torah calls it. There's so much greenery and grass. This area right here is perfect for our flock. It's perfect for our cattle. It's perfect for our sheep. You know what? We're going to settle here. We're not going to go into Israel. What? Do you know who you're talking to, guys? You know who you're talking to? You're talking to the one that prayed 515 tefillot and begged to go in for one day. And you can go in for good. And you can settle down. And you can actually live there, the life of a Jew with all the mitzvot of Shemitah and Yovel and Maaser. And you just, giving it up? Could you imagine how that must have broken the heart of Moshe Rabbeinu? I mean, come on. And I'm thinking to myself, Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, don't you guys know who you're talking to? You're talking to the biggest advocate of Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu. And you're asking him to get pardon, permission, not to have to go to Israel? What were they thinking? And once we're asking questions, I want to ask you another question. God forbid, could you imagine if there was a family, American family, who didn't make it in the United States? They just didn't make it. They didn't make it. They decided they're going to pick up their family and go to a different country to live. Maybe they'll do better there. So where does every good Jewish family say, now listen, I didn't make it in the United States, I'll go to Israel, right? So they pick up the whole family, and the whole family gets on a flight on the way to Israel, and they stop over in Amsterdam. You know, cheaper flight, it's a stopover, not direct. They're there in Amsterdam for a few hours. And they decided, hey, you know, we're stuck here in the airport for a few hours on a stopover. All right. So father and mother, they go up to customs. They say, we're here for a few hours. We want to go out and do some shopping. It's okay. They let them into Amsterdam on their American passports. And they stay out there for a few hours just for the stopover. As they're out in Amsterdam, out and about, they start realizing, wow, Amsterdam has great shopping. Amsterdam's a cool place. Amsterdam has all different types of architectural relics. Amsterdam has a certain cultural flair of Europe, in old Europe. Amsterdam has a really nice attraction in tourism. So they turn to their kids and say, hey, Amsterdam's nice. You know what? Let's push off the flight. They push off the flight for a few days. They go to a hotel. The place is beautiful. Downtown Amsterdam, uptown Amsterdam. Husband turns to wife and says, I love this place. Amsterdam's great. You know what? I think I'll stay here. Israel's nice, but I think I'll stay here. If you were friends of this family, between me and you heard about this family who didn't make it in America, and they're on their way to Israel, and on their way they stop over in Amsterdam, and they decided, you know what? We don't need Israel. This place is nice. I think I could really be very successful here. I mean, I'm thinking out of the box. Good Jewish mind. I'm seeing exactly what Amsterdam has, and maybe more importantly, what they don't have. I can import this, and I can import that, and I can do really well in Amsterdam, the father says. And instead, he misses the flight connecting to Israel, and he remains with his family, and he lives in Amsterdam. What would you think about that family? I ask you. Not to judge people. I don't, God forbid, we're out of the judging business. This is the 3 weeks. The last time you'd ever want to judge anybody. I don't mean about judging, but how would it rub you? That's really what I want to know. Would it rub you a little odd? You on your way. You on your way to the Holy Land. You're on your way to the Promised Land. What happened? How did you settle for Amsterdam over Israel? All right, you can make a few bucks in Amsterdam. I get it. All right, it's a nice European country. But you were on your way to Israel. You were actually on your way. You see, let me get something clear here. An American family, you grew up here. Your parents were here. Your grandparents were here. You live here. You made a life here. You're part of a community here. Okay, I get it. I understand. No one's saying that everyone should get up and go to Israel, especially if they're not going to have a parnassah over there. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying this family, the story that I told you, was about a family that was leaving anyways. They were in travel. They were en route, in journey to Israel. And on their way, they stopped over temporarily, Amsterdam, just for a stopover flight. And then you hear that they fell in love with Amsterdam, thinking that they would make all types of financial success there, and not making it to Israel. What would you think? Would you scratch your head twice? No. What happened here? Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, these two tribes traveled for 40 years in the desert. They got out of Egypt. They were beaten by the Goyim. They saw the splitting of the sea. They made it to Har Sinai. They saw God on the mountain. They said, Na'aseh v'nishma. They took the Torah. And now, they're on their way to Israel with the Aron, with the Torah, with a Mishkan, with God's presence. And the last stop, our homeland. Home, like E.T. says, right? Home. Home. This is homeland. And by what? By the 10-yard line? You stop? Right outside of Israel? Go in! No, Moshe Rabbeinu. This spot's good. Right here, Amsterdam. I think I can make some money here. It's good brush, good greenery for the cattle, for the sheep. This is good for business. I'm going to stay here. How do we understand this, guys? How do we understand this? So, there is a little bit of a secret here that Chazal pick up on very quickly. And this is something that I'd like to talk to you about tonight. And if you hear this, I think you'll already catch the giveaway before I even say it. They come to Moshe Rabbeinu, and these are the words that they say. Vayomeru vayigishu elav they come close to Moshe, Vayomeru, and they say to Moshe Rabbeinu. And what do they say? Gidrot son nivne lemiknenu po. We want to build corrals for our sheep and our cattle because this is a great place for pasture. Ve'arim letapenu. We also want to build cities for our children. This is what they tell Moshe Rabbeinu. We want to stay here, me'ever layardeh. So Moshe Rabbeinu turns around and he says to them the following, okay guys, if that's what you want to do, then listen up. Binu lachem arim letapechem. Go build cities for your kids. Ugderot letzonechem. And then you can build corrals for your sheep. V'hayotze mipichem tasu. And what came out of your mouth, keep your word and stick to it. Do you see the difference between what they said to Moshe and what Moshe said back to them? They said to Moshe Rabbeinu, we want to build corrals for our sheep, our cattle, and cities for our kids. Moshe answers back, no. You got it backwards. You don't put your cattle before your kids. You don't put your money before your children. What does Moshe Rabbeinu answer? Says Moshe Rabbeinu, B'nu lachem arim letapechem. First, build cities for your kids. And then, ugderot litzonachem. And then you build for your cattle and your corrals and your businesses. Don't put your money before your kids. Wow, that's a big point. Moshe Rabbeinu is basically telling these two tribes, where are your priorities? You got your priorities messed up. You put your businesses and your money before your children, before the well-being of your kids. But in truth, Rabotai, I know this is a weighted topic and it's one that's uncomfortable to talk about. But don't think for 1 minute that this was just a problem of yesteryear or once upon a time. This is an issue that we have ad hayom hazeh. Our priorities. What we call in English the money bug. Once a guy has that money bug, he sees nothing else but no wife, no kids, no family. I'm building a business. Stand out of my way. I will plow over anyone that gets in my way, whether it be competition, whether it be family, whether it be children, whether it be wife. If I need to go to China for 3 weeks, I'm going to China for 3 weeks. What about your kids? What about your wife? She'll go to her mother, and the kids will, what do you mean? I pay enough tuition to the schools. No, Rabbi? You want other people to bring up your kids? Really? For a few bucks? But Rabbi, these guys are charging 20 grand tuition. How else am I going to pay it? I understand. I'm not telling you not to go into business. I'm asking you, where are your priorities? But Rabbi, how else am I going to do business if I don't go for 3-4 weeks? 2 to 3 times a year? And gee, that's funny. Because then God brought along COVID-19. Corona. And all the guys that said it's impossible to do business any other way suddenly found out that they made more money during Corona over Zoom from home as a father, as a husband, than disappearing and being an absentee husband and father for months at a time a year. And Hashem said, Shoo. That shoe is Arabic, if you haven't picked that up. Now what? Now what? And he showed us through Corona that we had our priorities messed up for years. For years. We were so backwards. One virus comes along and turns the world upside down. And suddenly it shows us that what we thought we knew, we didn't know. And what we thought was the only way had no shaykhut. And at the end of the day, we realized that he's the one that sends the parnasah, and he wants us to be a dad to our kids and a husband to our wives. And he did not ever want the money to come first. And this is exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu is telling these two tribes. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, I picked up something on the way you posed your question. You said that you wanted to sit me'ever la'yarden, and what did you say? You said you wanted to build corrals for your cattle, and you wanted to build cities for your kids. You put your money before your kids. I picked up on that innuendo. I picked up on it. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu jumps in as a real Rebbe would. A Rebbe that's coming to give a Talmid Musar. He's coming to give him real Musar and love. And he says, my Talmud, listen, my student, you have it backwards. You have it backwards. You first build cities for your kids, and only then do you build corrals for your businesses, for your sheep. You have it backwards. Don't put your money in front of your children, in front of your marriage. You know how many guys over the years came to me on their advanced years of life, guys that hit their 50s, 60s, and they came to me quietly and they said, Rabbi, I worked so hard over the years. I totally missed out on the upbringing of my kids. You know how many guys I heard that from? I missed the best years of my children's lives because I was nowhere to be found. I lost the best years of my marriage because I was nowhere to be found. I was Ebed Abadi. And I thought I was doing the right thing. And I thought it was going to be for the big payoff. And it turns out that I look back now in hindsight and I realize that I paid way too big of a price for the business that I built. I have no relationship with my kids. They actually resent me. And I have no real relationship with my wife. We live together as friends. You know how many times I've heard this? Screams Moshe Rabbeinu, don't fall into the money bug. Don't turn the American dream into the American nightmare. Have priorities. Have priorities in life. What's important? And what is smoke and mirrors? Start learning emunah and bitachon. Start learning concept of faith, concept of reliance on Hashem, and start learning truth about who is really in control of your life. Who's really giving you your wealth? Who's really giving you your health? Who's really building your family? And if you would start, you'd realize that the one that's giving you all the blessing doesn't want you to lose out on your other blessings. He gave you kids because he wants you to love them. He gave you a wife because he wants you to cherish her. He gives you blessing because he wants you to have all the good. But this guy thinks that he's the one that's in control, and therefore he's making the decisions, and he's going to decide what he's putting efforts into and what he's sacrificing for. And at the end of the day, Hashem says, oh, you think it's you? You think that by you deciding instead of working from 9 to 5, you're going to work from 9 to 9 because you think you're going to do so much better financially on the over hours, and you don't get to see your kids, and you don't get to see your wife, and you don't get to spend time with family, and you have nothing of quality running in your life. You really think that that's going to pay off for you? Hashem says it's because you think it's you. if you believe that God is the one that's blessing you with your money, He's the one that gives you the product, He's the one that whispers into your ear the marketing ideas, the brilliant concepts of sale. If you believe it's from Him, you wouldn't have to work past 5 o'clock. You would do the norm. What we call in Hebrew, hishtadlut. Normal hishtadlut. Like the Bet HaLevi writes the Bet HaLevi, the minute a person overdoes hishtadlut, it's counterproductive. Because then it shows that you don't believe that you're just doing hishtadlut so that Hashem, who you're relying on, will deliver you everything you need. The minute you're overdoing it, it's showing that you think it's you. And that's the minute that your priorities go down the drain. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu tells Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven. He said, what did you guys just say? You're going to build corrals for your sheep and cities for your children? You put your money before your kids? You got your priorities messed up. No. Says Moshe Rabbeinu the other way. Listen to these words. Moshe Rabbeinu's retort. Listen to the words. Bnu lachem arim l'tapechem. First build cities for your kids. Your kids come first. Come on. Get your priorities straight. Ugderot l'tzonachem. Then you can worry about your money. But what's more important? You know how many people have sacrificed their children, their marriages, for a business that they thought would take off, working till wee hours in the night, wee hours in the morning, absentee dad, no one saw the guy for years. Shabbat is the only time the kids saw him, by the Shabbat table, and 10 minutes after Kiddush, 3 minutes after Hamotzi, he's already sleeping in the soup. That's dad. And what type of work ethics are you giving to your kid? And what type of priorities is this child going to go into life with? And that's why our kids walk around with the money bug. Money. They're 15 years old. They want to get out of high school. I have to make money. It's like, somebody give me oxygen. I have to make. Give me another $5 bill. And they'll sell their brother down the stream. They'll sell their brother. They'll sell their grandma down the stream because they were so hyped up on this money bug, because that's the way they saw it. Our priorities. That's why, says the Khatam Sofer, something incredible, guys. This is off the charts. He says, listen to this, at the end of the Pasuk, Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, Bnu lachem arim l'tapechem. Build cities first for your kids. Then afterwards take care of your businesses. And now listen to the last 3 words of that pasuk. And then he says, V'hayotze mipichem ta'asu. And what came out of your mouth, what you said, keep your word. Whoa, Moshe Rabbeinu, keep your word? Well, you don't trust us? Your brother-in-law? You don't trust me? Well, why did he say this at the end of the pasuk? V'hayotze mipichem ta'asu. Remember what you promised. You're going to go into Israel first. You're going to fight the wars with all the Jews. And then when all the wars are done and all of Israel is conquered, you're going to come back Me'ever LaYarden, and you're going to actually be with your family settled on the other side of the Transjordan. Remember, says Moshe, keep your word. Why wouldn't they keep their word? Why would Moshe Rabbeinu, says Khatam Sofer, he's the one who asks this, he says, why would Moshe actually use the term? It sounds like he doesn't trust him. V'hayotze mipichem ta'asu. Keep your word. Why won't we keep your word? We told you that we agreed to the deal. Why wouldn't they keep their word? Answers Khatam Sofer, because the minute Moshe Rabbeinu saw that they had the money bug and that their priorities were all about money, says Khatam Sofer, when you find somebody that lives and breathes money, 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 they'll sell their own mother down the river for another buck. And therefore, v'hayotze mipichem ta'asu. If you're so indulged in the tava of money your satiation will never come to a full. You never get satiated from the ta'ava of money. And for another few dollars, they'll lie and they'll do whatever they got to do. And therefore says Moshe Rabbeinu, v'hayotze mipichem ta'asu. Once you're so into money, you better be careful that you don't become a crooked person. You keep your word. Unbelievable. The great Reb Tzadok HaKohen, a great rabbi, he says that there are all different types of ta'avot in the world. There's a ta'ava for eating, right? People love to eat. There's a ta'ava for women, right? Immorality. There's a ta'ava for money. There's a ta'ava for all different types of things. Listen to this. He says that the ta'ava for money, in a certain sense, could be more dangerous than all the other ta'avot. It could be the biggest ta'ava possible. Why? Listen to his reasoning. He says because ta'ava for food, but eventually there's a human makeup where the body says, I'm full. At least till tomorrow morning. But I'm full, right? You go out to the great restaurant, you pound that steak, 30 ounce, wow, piece of heaven. You rip it to shreds. There's nothing left but the bone. You did justice. Kol hakavod. You did justice. But then after that, with a few fries here and there and a few sliders, your body says, I'm full. So I have the ta'ava of food, but it comes with a cap, where there's a point that the body says, I'm full. Ta'avat nashim. There's a point where the mind and the body says, okay, for now I'm done. But when it comes to money, says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, lo yizbach kesef. Never enough. Never enough. You know the song? Never enough. Never enough. Never enough. For me. Never enough. 10 million. 20 million. 30 million. 50 million. How much? How much is going to be enough? No, it's not enough. Not enough. I got a building in the city, I need another building. I got 2 buildings in the city, I need a hotel. Play Monopoly. Somebody's going to land on me one day. I got 2 buildings, I need the Chrysler building. I need a trophy building. It doesn't end. It doesn't end. There's nothing in a person's makeup when it comes to the lust and the ta'ava of money that the bell goes off and says, enough, I'm full. There's no such thing as full when it comes to the ta'ava of money. And therefore said Moshe Rabbeinu to these tribes, you're stricken with the ta'ava that there's never a fill. You always want more. And if that's the case, you'll do anything to get it. Don't become crooked. V'hayotze mipichem ta'asu. Keep your word. Don't become a crooked person. Because this ta'ava can bring you there. You can become a crook because of this ta'ava. Wow. Heavy. Heavy, 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 heavy. Hazit the poor kitty. This is the first time he comes to the class. I feel bad. I warned him before the class. I said, you walked in on the 3 weeks. These days, it's heavier classes than normal. I feel bad. Hazit, the kids can say, oh my God, this rabbi, he's too heavy for me. He's too much. You know what? But listen, these are the 3 weeks that we look the truth in the eye and we say the emet. Because there's no other way to get this Bet HaMikdash to come back if we don't talk the truth. Right or wrong, if we don't talk the truth. That's the truth. Moshe Rabbeinu saw that this tribe had such a lust for money. They had the money bug. That they'd rather stay here in Amsterdam than go into Israel. If the money is holding you down, you won't yearn for Israel. And if you don't yearn for it, you don't deserve it. And that's why he agreed to them, stay. You don't have the zechut yet to go in until you yearn for it. And we asked in the beginning of the class, from all people, you go to Moshe Rabbeinu and tell him you don't want to go into Israel? He was the one that prayed 515 times to go into Israel. He's the last guy that you want to tell him that you want to stay in the stopover and not get the connecting flight El Al into Israel. Who are you talking to, bro? And the answer is that when you're so blinded by that ta'ava for money, you don't even think. They only see the money. They could walk up to the ambassador of Israel and tell him, I don't want to go to Israel. Moshe Rabbeinu. They don't even think that it would strike him wrong. They could walk up to the ambassador of God and say, we want to build cities for our cattle and build our businesses and also take care of our kids, and not realize how those priorities are so messed up. They could walk up to a man of God, Moshe Rabbeinu, who brought the Luchot down from Shamayim, and say, we want more money, money, money. And don't worry, we'll take care of everything else. And do you want to hear something, guys? You want to hear something? The Midrash writes that they kept their words, and they went into Israel, and they fought the battles with everybody else. Matter of fact, they were first, to show that they were real on their deal. And they went into Israel, and they fought the battles, and they fought hard for 14 years. 14 years! The men of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven were away from their wives and children, fighting the battles of Israel in Israel. After 14 years, they conquered the entire land. They go back home. They didn't see their wife and kids for 14 years. They come home, and the 2-year-old boys that they left were now teenagers. Says the Midrash, they came home and they found their kids had long hair down to their shoulders. Midrash says when the Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven came home, they found that their kids had long hair down to their shoulders. They looked like the Goyim. It was like the way the Goyim looked in those years, like the Beatles. And when they came home and they saw their kids with long hair, they looked at each other and they said, Moshe was right. We paid too big of a price on our children. What did we do? What do we do? What do we do? Shh. Amazing. Gentlemen, we need a Rebbe. We need a Rebbe. We need somebody to guide us, to help us, to be able to see clearly in those moments that life is emotionally messed up in our minds. We have emotional attachments to certain things of our lives. We have emotional attachments to our money. We have an emotional attachment to our career. We have emotional attachments to our future. We think we have it all planned out, as clear as day, with no questions asked. We have major emotional attachments. Ask your Rebbe, just to get a second opinion. God forbid we should never know from it, but if somebody was diagnosed with a certain sickness, and the doctor tells them news that they don't want to hear, you know what the first thing they do? They go and they get a second opinion. And even if they hear a diagnosis that they do want to hear, you know what a lot of times cautious people do? They go and they get a second opinion. Let your Rebbe at least be your second. He should be your first opinion. But some guys aren't holding by that. I get it. I understand there's a lot of challenges, and we're very emotionally inclined in a lot of areas of life that we want so much to work out for us because we work so hard to get there. So we don't want people to tell us other than what we already want. We already have our own end game in our minds. We don't want people tampering with that. And I respect that. But as a second opinion, just as an ear, someone who's coming from an unemotionally attached position that could talk to you from a different angle, and talk over the pros and the cons and bring everything back to the table. Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven cried when they came home after 14 years. And they gave everything away for their cattle and their businesses to children with hair down to their shoulders. And they realized we paid way too big of a price for the money and the wealth that they thought that they were going to get. I had 2 students in the 12th grade many years ago. And they were best friends. One of them actually is here tonight. Just thought about that. Tall guy, you'll see him. And they both came to me by recess. Actually, they didn't come to me. I correct that. They were both talking to each other by recess, and I was sitting there on the Rebbe's table, making believe I wasn't listening, like every good rabbi. You know what I mean? And they were having this deep conversation. 12th grade, you know. They're having this deep conversation. One guy was saying that he's going to Lev, he's going to learn, he's going to this for a year. And the other guy was saying, oh no, I'm putting money away in the bank. My uncle is starting me off on a $150,000 investment. He got this great spot down by, what's the name of that area? It'll come to me in a minute. No, one of these areas. At this great spot, one of these Abid areas, I forgot which one, but it's like, at those years it was a hot spot for cell phone stores, you know. He's putting $150,000. He's giving me a store. He's giving me inventory. He's giving me goods. It's going to be my store. All I got to do is once I'm crazy successful, I just got to pay him back. That's it. Just got to pay him back. Interest-free loan, location, merchandise. He's setting me up like a bandit. And he says, listen, I made a cheshbon that, you know, the first year I'm going to make about 150, 200 grand. I'm going to give him 100 and I'm going to pocket 100. And then the next year I'm going to make 150, 200 grand. I'm going to give him 100. I'm going to pocket 100. And then the year after that, 100, pocket 100. No, that doesn't make sense. He already gave him 150. Sorry. I got too much into the story. But I think you get it. He gives him the first year 100, he pockets 100. The second year, he gives him 50, that's what I meant. And he pockets 150, whatever it was. And he's making this cheshbon. I'm listening to this. He says, by the third year, I already have close to $500,000 in the bank. I already have close to $500,000 in the bank. He tells me. He tells his friend. He says, then I'm going to go to my girlfriend. I'm going to make her the wedding in Sha'arei Sion. It's going to be, you don't get it, hello? I'm going to be bringing in the tulips from Holland, okay? I'm talking the tulips from Holland. I'm going to have the white Rolls Royce, drive me and my wife around to the wedding. I'm going to have a guy on a loudspeaker on Ocean Parkway screaming, Kacha ya'aseh le'ish ha'melech hafetz bikaro. They're going to roll the red carpet right down Avenue S. I'm going to have a marching band to my wedding. People are going to come out. The shutters are going to open. Ladies are going to be crying. They're throwing rice on me. And I'm going to be throwing kisses to the paparazzi. That's going to be me. That's going to be me. So go ahead. Go to Israel. How's the case? Go. But you'll see. You're going to come back. You're going to have nothing. If we're still boys, I'll lend you a few dollars. You know, on Yaakov Avinu it says that when he heard the brothers talking, and he heard Yosef talking to his brothers, it says, Ve'aviv shamar et ha-davar. And the father listened and didn't say a word, and he just held it and kept it. I held it. Didn't say a word, kept it, as if I didn't hear nothing. School's over, everybody goes their own way. This guy goes to learn. The other guy goes to his cell phone store. A year and a half later, I come to a wedding of a student of mine. I was supposed to speak by the chuppah. And I see, as I'm walking into the hallway, these two guys. And by the way, one of the guys here tonight, so if you bump into him, you know what I'm talking about. And you can verify this story. These two guys. By the way, this story went down in 2009. How many years ago was that? Was that?
12.
12 years. Holy cow, wow. 12 years. So in 2010, I walk into Sharet Zion, and there's these two guys in the hallway. I walk up to them, and I see the two of them are talking. Again, I didn't intrude, I just listened. I walked behind them, I overheard the conversation. This guy just came back from Israel. He tells his friend, "So, do you have $250,000 yet in the bank? When's your Sharet Zion wedding? Did you buy her a 10-carat diamond? Let's go! What? And the guy's quiet, doesn't say a word. And he turns to his friend and says, "What did you do the last year?" Apparently they just met up with each other. They didn't see each other for the last year. He says, "Well, I finished Masechet Megillah, I finished Masechet Chagigah, I finished Bava Metzia, and I just yesterday made a siyum on the entire Ben Ish Chai of the entire Torah." Wow. Really? Holy cow. He says, "So, what about you? How's your store doing? You didn't come with me for this. You were building incredible stuff. What happened?" He says, "Well, his head drops. The location wasn't as good as we thought. And after the first 2 months, we were losing money. And I begged my uncle, don't close the store, so we went for 6 months. I begged him, no, it's going to come back, you'll see. And after a year, we went bust. And the store closed. And now I owe my uncle $150,000. I'm in the red." I said, "Really?" He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Worse comes to worse, even worse. I have to work for my uncle now. And I'm not making a penny because every nickel I make is going towards the $150K that he put up for my store. So I'm not going to be making a nickel for the next 2 years." This guy that went, he found a girl. He has a sneaker business. And he learns Yomam V'Layla. And the other guy worked for the next 3 years to pay off the chov. And then he started working a new business. And that didn't go anywhere. This guy, 10 years later, gets married. Every time I think about the story, I cry. And I said to him once, I said, I wish we were close enough that every step of life we can talk about. This is a free country. But be careful with the money bug, because it could take the greatest people and swing their minds around, and we lose our priorities. And at the end of the day, says Moshe Rabbeinu, I want to remind you what we were here for. Don't take your eye off the ball.